So we're chugging along with this process of Krabbe disease newborn screen from the lab processes through the initial conversations. And now have already talked about just before lunch, and you're going to continue this conversation about transplant and readying centers to be able to provide transplantation for this condition. So this is going to be a panel discussion. Hopefully we can have people participating. I'll just call up our participants, and then Dr. Kurtzberg is going to take the lead in moderating the panel. So I'll first call up Kristen Webb. Kristen is one of our parent advocates, and we're really extremely happy to have you here. And before we get started with the discussion, Kristen's going to be able to say some words. So thanks so much for joining us today. We have Dr. Paul Orchard coming. So you can come on up, Medical Director of the Inherited Metabolic and Storage Disease Program and a professor in the Department of Pediatrics, Division of Bone and Blood and Marrow Transplant at University of Minnesota. Yeah. We have Dr. Rangarajan, Clinical Associate Professor of Pediatrics, Division of Blood and Marrow Transplant and Cellular Therapy at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Ohio. We have Dr. Jennifer Rubin, child neurologist and director of the Leukodystrophy Care Center at Ann and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago. And Dr. Shalini Shenoy, the Teresa J. Vietti Scholar and Professor of Pediatrics at Washington University in St. Louis. So thanks so much for joining us, and I'll let you just briefly again introduce Kristen.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for joining the panel. We're going to start with Kristen Webb and her family, Owen, who had a transplant a long time ago when he was a baby at Duke. And Duke is really incredible service dog, right? That's his name, right? Yeah. But Kristen is going to tell you their story just to set the tone and really understand what it's like from a parent's perspective.
Hello, I'm Kristen, and this is my husband, Kyle. And we are parents to Owen, and then we also have a daughter, Mabry Kate, who passed away from Krabbe before Owen was born. And then we also have a newborn baby, Sunny, in the back. And she doesn't have Krabbe. But just a real shortened version of our story. He wasn't caught on newborn screening, but we are full believers in that because we've seen what early detection can do. We credit Mabry with saving his life because she's the one that gave us the knowledge of the disease. And when we found out we were pregnant with him, we were able to get him tested. We went through the whole diagnostic odyssey, which I'm sure you've heard about from other families before with her. But we were able to plan ahead with him, with Dr. Kurtzberg and her amazing team at Duke. So he was born at Duke in March of 2015 and never left the hospital for 110 days. And while it was just full of hills and valleys, a lot of valleys, he went to the ICU a couple of times, but overall you can see the impact that it made on his life, and we would do it all over again. He doesn't remember any of it, obviously, which we're thankful for, but it's clearly effective and been life-changing for Owen. Our daughter passed away just before she was 11 months old, and so it should have looked very similar for him. And Owen is going to be in 3rd grade this year. He's 9 years old, and he's really a celebrity at his school. I work at his school. I'm a teacher, and it's really cool to see when he goes down the hallway, all the kids are wanting to give him hugs and high fives and yelling his name. And it's really a neat thing to see. And Owen lives a full, fun life. He's actually pretty hilarious. He loves to joke around and play pranks on people. In fact, he just did on the elevator with his dad. He thought about doing it with you, Dr. Kurtzberg, a second ago. but I told him no. But he's very witty. He loves to tell jokes. He's even played t-ball. So he had some people ask if he wanted to play on the team, and he had been hitting off the tee. And their first game, the coach actually shocked both of us, throwing him a pitch, and he hit it. And we were both just really amazed with that. We both play golf, and he also loves to hit golf balls. He hits on his knees. And he loves to putt as well. He has played in a wheelchair basketball league and a soccer league, and he's been to Disney World going on 10 times now. So he's just full of life. He's so fun to be around. His smile's infectious, and we're just so thankful for the opportunity to have gotten him treatment. We wish that we could have said the same for Mabry, and that's why we feel that newborn screening is so important, so that future children born with Krabbe can have a future like Owen's. And I know a lot of times people think that he's limited because of his physical and mobility issues, but he never wavers from who he is. He doesn't ask questions about why he's different, and I hope that he always stays that way. He just has such a positive outlook on life. So while he might be restricted in some ways, he's makes up for it in so many other ways. And we're just super thankful for you, Dr. Kurtzberg, and everything that you did for him. So thank you.
When you want to say hello to everybody?
Hi,
Tell me your name.
Owen,
You tell me.
9.
Thank you for coming. Are you being shy? Okay. So we hope this session, which is a panel discussion, can really be focused on how to get ready when you're a transplant center to transplant babies, to take referrals of newborns with Krabbe, infantile Krabbe, and to put together the infrastructure, the team, et cetera, you need to really make it go smoothly. And everyone sitting at this table probably has done it more than once now, but had their first experience in the last decade or so. And I was hoping that we could gain some insights into what I call transplant preparedness for states when they're interacting with their local transplant program. And thought we could go down the road for a sec and just say who you are, what your institution is, how many newborns with Krabbe you've encountered since newborn screening to start. And then we'll come back and I'm going to ask you all some specific questions.
Thanks, John. So I'm Paul Orchard. I'm at the University of Minnesota. We've been interested in transplanting lysosomal disorders for a long time now. I've actually been there a long time now, but we just started newborn screening in, what was it, Dieter? March? Something like that. So within a month, we ended up identifying the first patient. It was cytosine was 149, as I remember, something like that. So we got it was Easter Sunday, actually. I got a call from the geneticist who was in the emergency room talking to the family, and we ended up talking to the family a bit as well. But I think, we'll come back to this, but I think having previously established that this was coming and having everybody on board so that they were anticipating this as a potential issue, even though we thought it might be a year or two before it actually happened, was really important in being able to get the ball rolling.
I am Hema Rangarajan. I'm one of the bone marrow transplant physicians at Nationwide Children's Hospital, affiliated with Ohio State University. And I work closely with Margie Ream, our neurologist at NCH. And we have transplanted 3 babies with Krabbe so far, infantile Krabbe, and 2 of them were part of the publication with Dr. Kurtzberg. I think when we first, and I'll talk more about it, we got experience with our first patient, and now we're like a well-oiled machine. We know how to run the parts smoothly. We also have a clinical practice guideline, how to go about doing this. So now, thanks to the mentorship of Dr. Kurtzberg, we reached out to her with our first patient, and now we kind of run independently and just inform her when a baby has, when we're taking a baby to transplant. So we'll talk about it.
Hi, I'm Jen Rubin. I'm a child neurologist in Chicago at Lurie's at Northwestern Children's Hospital. I am the token neurologist on the team. The bulk of what we do for stem cell transplant are done by our amazing stem cell colleagues. I hope to be able to provide a little bit of insight from the pediatric neurologist standpoint. We've had 5 babies in Illinois identified with infantile Krabbe disease. One was identified. We've had 3 kids transplanted. 2 families chose not to transplant. And I actually think one of those was identified via sibling and before their newborn state screen came back positive. And we have 2 others that are probably in the late infantile, one who is symptomatic and one who we're following very closely. And then we've had a handful of not otherwise specified Krabbe patients.
And I'm Shalini Shinoy. I'm from St. Louis, from Washington University, and I'm a pediatric stem cell transplant physician as well, who does the non-malignant disorder transplants mostly at our institution. And Missouri is a screening state, I think, joined very early into the newborn screening practice, which we are grateful for. And I've worked for many years with Dr. Kurtzberg on many different, not just Krabbe, but many different projects. And I think so we follow 2 transplanted patients, a third that was transplanted at Duke and now lives in St. Louis that we follow, and a patient who chose not to go to transplant as well when we discussed the disease and the choices with the family. And I think, like Hema said, we have definitely learned along the way. And all these babies were transplanted very early, within 30 days of life, which was really nice. And the first time around, I think we formed the team. Our neurologist, Dr. Galindo, is here in the audience, with the genetics team, with neurology and us, plus all the support staff from each of these divisions. We have a very fixed team now that gets alerted whenever there is a screen that's positive, and we take it from there, which is a nice place to be in after that initial starting trouble when we knew what we needed to do. And I think since then, we have all our practices in place. Our everything's like the call to the HLA lab, for example, the pre-transplant workup, the admission, the description to the families on staying and what the transplant workup entails, and then the follow-up is all kind of set at this point, and we feel very fortunate to have all those people working with us that do a fabulous job in helping follow patients and getting them what they need, starting from the social worker to the psychologist to the financial piece, which we had a little discussion earlier, I believe, about getting the transplant approved. It just gets started the day we get the call, and everything moves at a really fast pace, which is great. So
Thank you. So I realize we've sort of divided people here, but it wasn't intentional. You guys are lonely down there, or you're okay? You're okay. So if you think back on the first baby, what comes to mind first of what you wish you could have done that you didn't think of or didn't know about ahead of time? I'll start with you, Paul.
Well, I think the first calls initially were how are we going to do this? I think it became really clear early that admitting the patient was the best thing to do, because we are starting to explore how we're going to potentially evaluate the patient as an outpatient. And then we're getting all sorts of issues in terms of like, can't get approval to have that done and can't get approval to have that done. And, you know, we won't be able to get an MRI for a few days, you know, all these types of things. And it's like, okay, this isn't going to work. So we're just going to have to admit this baby. So then a lot of the barriers to the insurance related issues came off the table. So I think obviously that's going to be the thing we're going to be doing moving forward, because it was otherwise just not going to work. So I think that was one of the initial things, and I'm trying to work out the HLA typing and trying to have that done expediently ends up being an issue. So, I mean, just to kind of put this in context a little bit. So if it's going to be a week or 8 days or so before you actually have the diagnosis and have the cytosine, and you're trying to get the transplant done by the time the baby's a month old, you only got 3 weeks to do this. Our preparative regimen is 9 days. Doing HLA typing generally takes a week. If you're going to do confirmatory typing on the cord blood, that takes another week. So there's like no time to change anything if that's what your time course is going to be. So trying to figure out how we could cut time off of all those various pieces, because ordinarily, for instance, we wouldn't order a cord blood until we got all the typing done and got the enzyme testing done and those types of things. We wouldn't admit the patient until we have the cord blood in house. And so there's all these various rules that you have to break. So, you know, we include people into this a bit up front so that they knew that was going to happen, but it still upset the apple cart for a lot of people. But.
So I echo what Dr. Archer just said. When we had our first patient in 2017, I remember emailing Dr. Kurtzberg and taking the phone and calling her, and I said, help. How do we go about doing this? We met the family along with a geneticist and our neurology colleagues, and we said, okay, let's do the HLA typing because that's one of the first steps. We did a buccal swab and it didn't result properly. And that was our first lesson. Okay, let's go straight to the blood next time. When I first met the family, obviously it was emotionally overwhelming for the family and they wanted a day to process, which I thought, okay, a day should be okay. But they came 3 days later. So that's when I realized, oh no, we should capture them immediately. And then like Dr. Archer said, there's just a lot of testing. It's just not humanly possible to ask the family, come this day, come that day, get this done, get that done. Some need sedation. And usually when we do sedation in babies as young as the babies are, we try to club many procedures together. It's just much more human to do that way so that we don't have to sedate the babies too many times. So it just became logistically more easier, and also from an insurance perspective, get them admitted and go straight to chemo. And I learned first time through Dr. Kurtzberg, I can start chemotherapy even before the cord arrives. And we have learned how to approach the NMDP. And this was just learning from a center who has had more experience than us. We reached out. We are a big center ourselves, but we haven't had established transplant for lysosomal diseases for a long time. This was our first encounter, and I think we never hesitated to reach out to the experts and say, hey, can you guide us how to get this? We know how to do a transplant, but what are the nuances that might be slightly different when we approach a child with Krabbe? And with her guidance, Dr. Kurtzberg was kind enough to write the letter to NMDP and say, allow Hema and team to get access to the cord even after they start conditioning. So this is very, like Dr. Archer said, we break the rules. We break many rules when it comes to baby transplants. And this is one of the transplants we break a lot of rules and just cut corners to get it as fast as possible. And calling the HLA lab is also very crucial because the HLA lab gets a lot of typing to be done, and this is not their priority. So we have to ask them to bump it, and they will bump it. And they'll give us some preliminary typing. At least we can start choosing the cords because that is very, very time sensitive for us, what cords we choose. And we also do the enzyme levels on the cords to make a best determination of which cord would be the best. And I always I always cross-check with my colleagues across the country. Did I do this right? Did I choose the right one? I have a double cross-check always. And I think in the process, with the second, we were very comfortable. And third, it became like a very well-oiled machine. We knew the various steps. So I think, open collaboration helped us. Talking to colleagues across the country helped us and give us the best outcomes for our patients. And also multidisciplinary cannot be done by ourselves. We need the social worker, we need the psychologist. We also need a lactation consultant because moms are just given birth and they want to feed and bond with the baby. And this is so emotionally overwhelming. It's so much easier done inpatient where I have all the resources to reach the mom in one go. So I think I often forget, I think it's very important for us to remember that the parents are part of this team and they often forget to take care of themselves. So I always feel like we need to start taking care of the parents and giving them that support. And it's so much easier than sending them home and expecting that they pick the pieces together. So that has worked for us. It does take a little bit of convincing with the family because like somebody said, I don't think they listen to everything we say. It's very foggy, it's glazed, but frequent contact and inpatient gets the message across. That definitely helps.
So we had our, in anticipation of coming to this conference, of course, myself and our stem cell doc and our genetic counselors out of the country. So of course, Friday morning, we got a call for our next baby. So we actually got a call this past Friday. So we're anticipating in the next few weeks to transplant our fourth baby. And what we've learned, I think, is that I think we're struggling a little with the over protocolized. I think what we've learned is that each family is different, each patient is different. What day of the week their results come back is different. Our very first case, we appropriately mobilized everything and admitted them. And it turned out that it was a weekend where some of the people were taking care of them, couldn't adequately explain what everything was for. I went in to see them, but by then they had already, had several unsuccessful LP attempts. And it just was a little bit of, it was very overwhelming and difficult for everyone. So for the next case, the pendulum swung the other way and we evaluated them urgently as an outpatient, got HLA testing that day, and then kind of brought them back for further testing. So every kid has been a little different. We had a 33-weeker who was premature and was still in the NICU when their tests came back positive, which gave us a little bit more time. We got them transplanted about 40 days of life, which was still preterm, but they were tiny. And so we were kind of struggling with how tiny is too tiny. So I think what I would recommend is having a good team in place. And then when you get those results, make a plan, preferably before you call the family. So when you call them, you have exactly what's in order. You're going to go to I prefer not to use the emergency room because all of the other associated germs and more people that they will interact with that will not be familiar with the condition. But whether you see them in clinic and tell them to be prepared to be admitted, if that's what the timing is going to look like when you see them in clinic, or you tell them that you'll meet them at the hospital, but to have a plan in place so that when you call them, you know exactly what you're doing. And I would say the HLA typing is, our current HLA typing was held up by the Republican National Convention. We just found out. So and the storms, between the storms. So things like that, I mean, I can't control the weather. So, nor can I control the Republic.
I think our first transplant was 7 years ago, and the patient, the decision was taken away from us because the patient had traveled quite a distance to come to the hospital for that first consultation anyway. So they, in fact, they are going to be at this meeting, I understand, I think tomorrow. So they had to stay so that we could get all the workup done. We called the HLA lab and said, how fast can you turn around an HLA typing? They said, I can get it to you in 48 hours. So even as the testing was being done, the HLA typing was back, the search was done, it all went very smoothly. And my staff later told me, why don't you put everybody inpatient to get this workup done? Why do you ever send them home? It's so difficult on us to get the workup done. So I think keeping them in-house, just as everyone has expressed today, is a good way to coordinate the sedation, to coordinate the procedures, to get the LP done, the MRI done, the neurology assessment done. It all went pretty smoothly. So the next time onwards, we were like, that is exactly how we are to do it, to get the speed that we would need to get the transplant underway. And then from that point on, I don't think we came across any major hurdles, because then the child smoothly transitioned over to starting the conditioning. The family was in the room. They stayed with the baby and then went home at the time of discharge. That's not to say, we heard the patient experience, and we heard about the hills and the valleys, and I would totally agree. There are lots of hills and valleys. One day the count is great, the next day it doesn't look as good. There are so many different things to deal with along the way with transplant, but I think at the end of it, what you hope is for full engraftment, good counts, very little maybe post-transplant side effects, and hope for the best for the central nervous system. And that's what we all work toward. So
I want to mention a couple of things, and I want to ask Kristen a question. One thing that hit me, and it actually hit me recently, Rob, when you referred to New York baby. But these are newborns, and there are special things you do for newborns, and people who normally take care of newborns know those things. You give them vitamin K, you give them vitamins, how you feed them, all those kind of things, which have nothing to do with Krabbe disease. It's just how you take care of a newborn. But I think sometimes as transplanters, we forget all that. And we're so focused on what you normally do as a transplanter and all these tests and all the stuff you do around chemo and the lines and the this and the that you do forget this is a newborn baby in front of you and you need to do some of that care. And one of the things that touched me the most about our recent baby was I went to see the mom who was postpartum only, not even 2 weeks at that point. And the nurses had gotten a bassinet from the newborn nursery, so the baby could be in a bassinet and the mom could sleep in the bed that's normally in our transplant room. And that seems really simple, but normally the baby'd be in a crib and the mom would have to sleep on the parent bed by the wall, which is not a comfortable bed per se. And just little things like that, I think you do differently because you have this little baby and the spaces they occupy are different, the way you monitor them are different. And I just want to say we need to remember those things. Because then when Owen came to Duke, you were about 35 weeks, and we had the plan that we were going to test him to see if his lungs were mature by doing amnio. And then if that was his lungs were mature, then you were going to be induced. But what happened was when they put the monitors on to start thinking about doing the amnio, he was in fetal distress. So they actually changed plans rapidly and did a kind of what we call a crash delivery to get him out because he was having periods of low oxygen, which is something we call HIE. And he ended up going to the NICU, special care nursery. You ended up being, quickly admitted, and everything sorted out over the next few weeks, but it wasn't the kind of smooth, journey we had planned, which already was a little bit of an odd journey, right? Do you remember anything about what it was like for you during those first few days? I mean, you gave birth quicker than you thought, and then you were all in the hospital. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I just want to preface it with our daughter passed away 7.5 weeks before we went to the hospital to deliver him. And we live in Knoxville, Tennessee, so about 5 hours from Duke. So we had to pick up everything and basically move away for 8 months. But yeah, so I remember going to meetings and about insurance and what to expect and all those kinds of things. And the plan, talking about the plan that you talked about. And it was just very overwhelming. I don't remember her name, the second one down. She mentioned how there's just this fog and that we're not hearing everything that you're saying. And that's so true. A lot of it was so overwhelming that we couldn't process it, but we had placed our trust in Dr. Kurtzberg, and we had several phone conversations with her leading up to that point in time, which I think really helped her making herself available, being such a specialized doctor that she is. The fact that she answered my phone calls, answered my texts even before he was born, would talk to us for 45 minutes with no issues, made us a lot more comfortable going into the whole process. So her making herself available for us was huge, and it helped us gain a lot of trust. And so even though we weren't hearing everything, we were trusting that she knew what she was doing and that it was going to turn out okay. But yeah, so the whole part about the plan not going the way that we had envisioned, same thing, just a huge whirlwind, a huge fog, just a lot of being scared because we had just buried one child and just fearful that we were going to have to do the same with him. But yeah, I don't remember. I remember it, but like I said, I don't remember a lot of the details and what was said and, um, you know, what the doctors were saying to us and that sort of thing. But like I said, the fact that we had built a relationship with her before we even got there, I think is probably the biggest thing for us that helped us get through that for sure. You have anything to add?
I guess I will say about the meetings that we had beforehand once we arrived at Duke. I guess as the father and the husband in this situation, we take on a different burden, or our minds work just a little bit differently. But of course, financially, just the burden it was going to put on our family to move away for 8 months and to be able to retain our house and just all the different things that came along with it. I will say the meeting that stuck out to me the most was when we discussed about the insurance and stuff like that. So to have that meeting ahead of time before we actually start the process of the transplant was huge for me. And I'll never forget, just how casually she said it. Oh, well, don't worry, we'll get it approved, and that's hard to say. I mean, but if it gets denied, we'll appeal, and if it gets denied, we'll appeal again, and we're going to get this sent through. And that was just weight lifted off my shoulders. I mean, just so much, just the dedication they would have to it for us, that we wouldn't be spending hours on the phone with insurance, was huge for me. So that part of the process was very nice.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to stop for a minute and ask if anybody in the audience has questions or comments. Joe.
I was curious about I've seen their like documentation for parents guidelines and things. Is everybody aware of those, and are those distributed to families in these situations? I believe that the Rosenau family had prepared one. I just see their name up on the list. So I don't know if those are available to everybody. I think that's still true, right? That there are those pamphlets and, guidelines.
I would like to, I had trouble finding I had trouble finding patient facing information in Spanish. I found one newborn on the Hunter's Hope website. There was one newborn screening positive pamphlet that was translated, but if anyone knows of more resources, or if we had some organizations that can make those more readily available, I think more resources for our non-English speaking families, particularly Spanish speaking families, would be really helpful.
Yeah, okay, because I think it might be Crabbe Connect that was.
Okay, I'll look on Crabbe Connect.
Are you thinking pamphlets, brochures, written information about Krabbe disease and about the decisions? I don't know. We need them. You're absolutely right. I don't know how
Yeah.
much of
I-
that really
I-
exists. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
created a family guide a couple years ago. It's
Yeah.
not, it's in
But it didn't-
English. But we created a family guide a couple years ago that needs to be edited down a little and just continue to revise, but gives information on the different risk levels and patient-facing sort of information and knowledge, ideas of what questions to ask, things to think about, that kind of stuff. So we do have that. And that's on the Hunter's Hope website, I believe. And we just need to edit it and fix it up a little bit, and maybe get it translated.
Okay, we should make that a project. Yeah.
I have a question for you. You know, I can only imagine how tough things must have been for you. As a new mom myself, I remember, I mean, not now, but I remember that fog, not really understanding anything that was going on in the hospital. You know, it's really hard. And I'm wondering, I have a couple of questions. One is, did you feel like you had the support you needed when you were going through all of this whole odyssey? And then also, is there anything that you feel could have been done differently or better throughout the whole process that would have helped you?
So as far as support, from like a hospital standpoint, is that what you're talking about, or like community? Yes, we had an overwhelming amount of support, from our community and from our family, starting with our daughter. And we both coach high school basketball, so it got a lot of publicity in the news and stuff like that in our local town, and just people reaching out and wanting to do things for our family and at basketball games to help support us, was a huge deal. In our church community, it was another big support. But that's, I feel, was a God thing, and was what got us through, was the amount of support that we had from friends, from family, and even strangers, people we didn't even know. So, yes, we had a huge amount of support. As far as things that we wish maybe would have gone differently, looking back, we just, like I said earlier, our trust was 110% with Dr. Kurtzberg and her team and what they were doing, and that they knew what they were doing. Owen went through, I think, because he was born prematurely, I think is what caused some of the major valleys that we went through. So I wish, it had been a little bit more smoother in that regard, but that's nothing that really could have been prevented, I don't think. I think when I look back and wish things would have gone differently, it might have been things that I wouldn't have been fearful of, like holding him. That was a big fear for me because he was hooked up to so many things. I didn't want to mess anything up, but at the same time, I wanted, like, I forget who was saying, but just that, to build that relationship that you have with your baby when they're first born. And I was just afraid to ask for that because I also didn't know if that was a possibility. So I feel, if I wish for anything different, maybe just knowing that it would have been okay to hold him, or would have been okay to do certain things that you want to do as a new mom, if that makes sense. You have anything? But overall, our experience was, I mean, for what it is, it was the best it could have been. And I think our focus was on one day at a time and looking toward the future for moments like this. And we're here now. And so we're so thankful for that.
Thank you. So we have to, I want to thank everyone for their contributions. We have to bring this to conclusion because there's another talk scheduled right now. So thank you all. And Kristen, thank you. Yeah.